The room was too bright. Not in a poetic way, in a migraine way. A white LED bulb above us buzzed faintly like it was struggling to stay alive. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she was pretending not to, like she always did with things that annoyed her. She poured me water from the carafe as if this were normal, as if I hadn't just returned from my mother's house, where I found a single earring under the guest bed we never used. It wasn't my mother's, and it sure as hell wasn't mine. She placed the glass in front of me with a gentle smile and sat down across the table, tucking one leg under her as she always did when she got comfortable. Her dress was new, forest green, soft, elegant, but there was a tiny thread sticking out at the seam near her shoulder. I focused on it, because looking at her face hurt. She was humming. Something light, tuneless. She stopped mid-hum and looked up. "You okay?" I nodded. Stupidly. Weakly. We hadn't even ordered yet, but I already wanted to leave. My fingers drummed on my thigh under the table. My stomach twisted. I wasn't hungry, hadn't been for days. She reached for the menu like this was some midweek ritual. It wasn't. This dinner wasn't on our calendar. It wasn't for our anniversary, a birthday, or anything. It was just placed, dropped into our lives like a trap with good lighting and clean cutlery. And when she finally asked, too softly, too sweetly, "Why are you so quiet tonight?" I didn't answer right away, because this wasn't the moment I'd planned. I was supposed to do this later. In the car. In the driveway. After I had time to breathe, to be a coward a little longer. But the way she smiled, like nothing was breaking, like this was just another dinner, it broke something in me. I looked her dead in the eyes. And I said, because I don't know how to say this without flipping the whole table over. Her eyes didn't move, but her breath caught, just for a second. And I knew. She already knew exactly what this was about. She blinked once, twice, and then smiled. Not the kind of smile you give someone you love. The kind you give a cop when you're trying to look innocent. She reached for her wine glass like I hadn't just said something nuclear and took a slow sip, holding my gaze like we were in some kind of contest. I didn't look away. Not this time. "You're being dramatic," she said finally, her voice flat. Maybe I was. But let me tell you something no one ever warns you about. Cheating doesn't always start with lipstick on a collar or a stranger's cologne. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it's quiet. It slips in through a routine. It hides in shared passwords and lazy Saturday mornings. It crawls into the bed you made together, and you don't notice until the sheets start feeling cold. I didn't find a text. I found a silence. It was in the way she didn't ask about my day anymore. In the way she started locking the bathroom door again, like we weren't 3 years past caring. In the way she laughed, too loud, too fake, when her phone buzzed with a message she didn't show me. One night, I told her a story about a customer at work who tried to pay me with lottery tickets. Not even a chuckle. She didn't even look up. Just nodded and said, "That's nice." She didn't hear a word of it. And maybe that's what finally made something snap. Not the fear of betrayal, but the weight of being ignored. Forgotten. Slowly erased. So, no, I didn't find a name in her texts. I found a pattern in her absence. I started watching. Not stalking, just noticing. The way you notice a bruise that doesn't hurt at first. How she started leaving for errands without her purse. Or how she never let her phone's screen face up anymore. Once, she came home smelling like mint and sandalwood, a cologne I didn't recognize. She said she tried a new essential oil at yoga. I don't go to yoga, but I know what aftershave smells like. Still, I waited. I waited because I wasn't ready for the truth. Because knowing it would mean doing something. And doing something meant breaking the last thing in my life that looked whole from the outside. But the earring at my mom's house, that was different. That was real. I had gone there to drop off an old lamp, something Mom wanted from our garage. I bent down to plug it in behind the guest bed, the one we used once last Christmas, and there it was. A small, golden hoop. Definitely not Mom's. And unless I started sleepwalking in drag, not mine either. I picked it up like it might bite me. Turned it over. Cheap, but clean. Like it had only recently been dropped. My mom came in with tea and asked why I looked pale. I lied. I said I was tired. Then I sat in the car for 45 minutes in her driveway, just holding it, turning it in my palm, imagining her wearing it, imagining her taking it off in that room, wondering how many times she'd smiled in that mirror before walking out like she was just running to the store. Back at the restaurant, she finally spoke again. "Whatever this is about, I think you need to check yourself before you say something you can't take back." Her tone was sharp now. tired, like she'd been rehearsing it, like she was the victim here. I looked down at the water glass she poured for me. I didn't touch it, because I couldn't remember the last time she'd poured me anything, not coffee, not juice, not even a glass of wine at home. This was a setup, a peace offering with sharp edges. So I leaned forward, slowly, and whispered, "Tell me his name." She didn't flinch, but the look in her eyes, that was the first honest thing I'd seen all night. She didn't answer. She just stared, blinked once, slowly. Her jaw tightened for half a second. You'd miss it if you weren't studying her like I had been for weeks. Then she reached for her wine glass again, calmly, like we were talking about the weather. I almost respected it, the performance. But performances only work when the audience still wants to believe. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally. Not who, not "Are you serious?" Not even "How could you?" Just denial, clean and flat, like a knife you wipe before you use it again. I could have laughed if I wasn't suffocating. "Do you want to know something strange?" I didn't even care who he was. Not really. Not in that moment. I didn't want to know his hobbies, what car he drove, what brand of cologne he wore when he touched her. I didn't want to imagine his hands, his mouth, his lies. I just wanted her to say it. Because if you say the name, it makes it real. And if it's real, I'm allowed to leave. But she wasn't going to give me that. She was going to bury it. Gaslight me. Wait for me to break first, and say something unforgivable so she could flip the narrative. That's how these things work when the cheater is calm and the faithful one loses his mind in slow motion. "You sure about that?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About what?" Like we hadn't just started unraveling in a public place over red wine and a basket of crusty bread. So I reached into my pocket. I had brought it with me. Not because I planned to pull it out. Not because I thought it would change anything. But because I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. I placed the earring gently on the tablecloth between us. No words. Just that tiny gold hoop, small enough to miss, loud enough to echo. She froze. Not visibly. Not a dramatic gasp or wide-eyed stare. But her breath caught. Her hand tensed slightly on the stem of her glass. She looked down at it like it was something toxic. And in that instant, she ran a full calculation behind her eyes. Denial? Justification? Manipulation? Then she said the line I will never forget. "I think it's time you talk to someone." I nearly laughed. A short, sharp breath that left me more empty than amused. Because that line? That's what people say when they're trying to erase your reality. "I am talking to someone," I said, my voice shaking. "Unfortunately, it's the one person who made me stop trusting my own memory." She looked away. Briefly. But that crack, that sliver of silence, was enough. "Who is he?" I asked again, but softer now. Not like an accuser. Like a man asking if the house is really on fire or if he's just smelling his own fear. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "I'm not doing this here." Oh, the classic redirect. Not a denial. Not even close. I nodded. "Then let's do it at home." She shook her head, and for the first time, I saw something close to panic flicker across her face, like a match that struck but didn't catch. "I'm not going home with you if you're like this." Like what? Paranoid. Accusing. Obsessed. Obsessed. That one hit. Because maybe I was. You don't sleep next to a stranger for months and not go a little mad. You don't watch the person you love slowly withdraw from you and stay completely sane. You don't start poring over receipts, schedules, patterns, smells, silences, and earring shapes without breaking something inside yourself. But I wasn't obsessed with her. I was obsessed with the version of her I thought I knew, the one I built my life around. The one who used to laugh at my awful jokes and beg me to dance with her in our tiny kitchen at midnight. That version? She didn't exist anymore. Or maybe she never did. She stood up then, slowly, with the kind of composed cruelty that only someone truly done with you can perform. "I'm going to call a car." I didn't stop her. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just sat there, alone at the table, with a half-drunk glass of water, a piece of cold bread, and a single gold earring catching the too bright light from above. And I whispered, more to myself than to her, "You forgot it under the bed, Leora. You were careful, but not careful enough." She paused mid-step and didn't look back. I didn't follow her when she walked out. I didn't call her name. I didn't rush after her like in some sad indie film where a dramatic speech turns everything around. I just watched her heels click across the marble floor, watched her press the screen of her phone with trembling fingers, and watched her vanish through the glass doors like I was watching a stranger disappear into fog. She didn't look back. It was a small mercy, really, because I'm not sure what she would have seen on my face if she had. Devastation? No, I had passed that hours ago. Anger? Maybe a flicker, but mostly stillness. A quiet kind of grief that looks a lot like nothing to people who don't know what to look for. The waiter came by, hesitant, eyes flicking between me and the empty seat across the table. He asked if everything was all right, like he wasn't already bracing to call security if I lost it. I gave him a small, pathetic smile and said, "Could you box the bread?" It was a stupid thing to say, but it was the only thing I could say that didn't make me unravel in front of strangers. He nodded and walked away fast, grateful I wasn't going to cry into the butter dish. I sat there another 12 minutes. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't pretending anymore. I didn't have to smile. I didn't have to make conversation with someone pretending not to lie. I didn't have to convince myself I was crazy. I was alone, yes, but I was finally honest. When I stood up to leave, I left the earring on the table. Not out of pettiness. Not as some dramatic statement. I just didn't want it anymore. Let someone else find it. Let someone else hold it and wonder who she used to be. I stepped out into the night air and didn't immediately feel relief. I felt something more dangerous, clarity. I didn't go home. I drove. No music. No GPS. Just me and the whirring buzz of streetlights as I passed through parts of the city that felt like memories I hadn't made yet. I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour laundromat near the edge of town. I sat there for 45 minutes watching a woman fold clothes in complete silence behind the window, a child sleeping on a bench nearby. No drama. No secrets. Just towels, shirts, socks, all lined up neatly, folded, and done. I envied her. Not because she looked happy. She didn't. But because everything she was holding had a place. Everything fit somewhere. I couldn't say the same about my life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once. Then twice. Then 3 times. I didn't check it. Not yet. Instead, I started to think. Not spiral. Think. If she lied about where she was going tonight, and she did, then she's lied about other things. Probably a lot of things. I hadn't even scratched the surface. I realized then I'd been reacting too much. Letting her lead the dance while I stumbled behind like a fool hoping the music would change. No more. If there's anything left to find, I was going to find it. Not to fix anything. That ship was halfway underwater. I just needed to know what kind of wreckage I was standing in. Because you don't build anything new until you know what's salvageable. And I had a theory. It wasn't just some harmless flirtation. Not just a night or two of attention. This wasn't about Sage, or whoever she was really seeing. No, this was bigger. There were cracks running beneath everything. Years of small lies that had never been caught. Tiny rewrites of history. I suddenly remembered the vacation we canceled last fall. The one she said we couldn't afford after her client ghosted her. I believed it. Booked a staycation instead. But now, that memory felt poisoned. I started replaying her tone, her body language that week, the meetings she took at odd hours. That was the real betrayal, wasn't it? Not just the cheating, but the way it reached backward, corrupting all the good memories. Making you question which ones were ever real. Eventually, I looked at my phone. 3 messages. 1 missed call. All from her. None of them said what I wanted them to. The first one, "Can we talk tomorrow?" I didn't expect that tonight. The second, "I need time to process what just happened. Don't make this uglier." The third, "You need to calm down. You're not being rational." That one hit me hardest. Because I was finally more rational than I'd ever been. And that terrified her. It's amazing what you can find when you stop trying to prove someone's lying, and instead just start assuming they are. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I sat on the edge of the couch in the dark, replaying every story she's told me in the last 6 months, sorting them into 2 mental piles, possible and performance. Spoiler, the second pile was heavier. She came home around 1:20 a.m. I didn't greet her. I didn't even turn on the light. I just watched her silhouette slip through the front door, clutching her purse like it held evidence. She didn't say a word. Not "I'm sorry." Not "Are you awake?" Nothing. She just climbed the stairs, heels off, bare feet soft on the hardwood. I listened as the bedroom door clicked shut. Not slammed. Clicked. Controlled. Practiced. The next morning, she left before I was even out of the shower. I expected a note. Some kind of passive-aggressive olive branch. But there was nothing. Just the faint smell of the perfume I once bought her for our anniversary lingering in the hallway. Jasmine and vanilla and rot. So I started digging. Not recklessly. Not angrily. I wasn't going to confront her again. That didn't work. I needed more. Not for her, for me. For closure. For clarity. For the version of myself I'd have to rebuild when all this was over. I started with our shared desktop. She always said she hated cloud storage, said it was creepy, insecure. So everything personal was saved on her local folders. I never snooped. Not once in 6 years. She even joked about it once, said I was terminally uncurious. She didn't mean it kindly. Turns out I should have been. At first, everything looked clean. Too clean. One main folder. Projects. Inside it, subfolders, clients, invoices, proposals. All dated, labeled, professional. But then I found the duplicates. Buried in a folder within a folder, disguised under miscellaneous temp, were copies of the same client PDFs, but with different timestamps. Some opened within the last 2 weeks, despite the original files being dated over 6 months ago. And in one of those PDFs, embedded on the final page, was a hidden comment. You had to enable annotations to even see it. But there it was. Include the spa trip details and invoice, but separate from main breakdown. Spa trip? There were no spa charges on the main breakdown. And I distinctly remember her telling me she went to that conference last March, the one she said was in Denver, where the weather ruined everything. She brought back a pamphlet from a branding summit. But now I'm wondering, was that pamphlet picked up in the hotel lobby? Or downloaded and printed later? Because a week after that trip, she had tan lines in April. And Denver doesn't give you a tan. I closed the folder and leaned back, breathing slow, hands shaking, but not from rage. From confirmation. This wasn't new. This wasn't recent. This was layered. Chronic. Planned. Hidden in plain sight. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. Because somewhere along the way, Leora taught me to lie. Not to her, but to myself. She taught me that discomfort could be ignored, that silence could mean safety, that it was better to nod and pretend than to look directly at what might hurt. She taught me to trust her because she was calm, even when my stomach screamed. But I learned too well. Now I could lie to myself while knowing full well I was being lied to. I could pretend that working late meant deadlines. That locked phones meant privacy. That distance meant stress, not strategy. Not anymore. I backed up the files. Saved everything on a hidden USB I'd had since college. Labeled it Taxes 2017. She wouldn't touch it. Then I cleaned the browsing history. Logged out. Restarted the computer. At 4:23 p.m. I texted her just once. Dinner at 7? Your pick this time. She responded 3 minutes later. Sure. Thanks for being patient. Patient. Is that what this was? No, not patience. Just collection. Because I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to threaten. I'm not going to cry in front of her again. I'm going to catalog every lie she left lying around. And then I'll burn the whole thing down. Quietly, efficiently, legally. The next time she sees me emotional, it'll be in court. Dinner was at a place called Calderon's, sleek, candlelit, with fake intimacy and real prices. She used to love it. Back when we were pretending to be a couple instead of cohabitants rehearsing old lines. I booked the reservation under a name she didn't recognize, Nate Carver. A tiny test. And just like I expected, she never asked why the hostess said it when we arrived. She smiled like it made sense. That's what liars do best, pretend to recognize things they've never seen. She ordered a cocktail she hadn't touched in over a year. Cucumber and basil. A drink she once said made her feel like a rich divorcee who paints watercolors for therapy. It used to make her laugh. Tonight, she didn't even flinch. She talked a lot. About work, the weather, the new intern with the tragically unfortunate name of Quigley. She smiled, used hand gestures, kept eye contact. It was a performance for herself, not me. Like if she kept the pace up, the tension wouldn't catch her. But I didn't match it. I didn't push. I let her fill the air. And somewhere between her rant about gluten-free tapas and a forced story about her coworker's breakup, she noticed. Why are you so quiet tonight? There it was again. That question. But this time, I didn't even blink. Because I already knew the answer. And I didn't need to say it. Instead, I tilted my head and just looked at her. Not through her, not past her, at her. Like I was memorizing a stranger's face I would never see again. and that unsettled her more than anything I could have said. She broke eye contact first. The rest of the dinner was quieter. She reached for her phone a few times, but stopped herself. I think she was afraid to check it in front of me, not because of guilt, but because of what my reaction might reveal. That's how close we were to the edge. When the check came, I paid without a word. She offered to split it, her version of diplomacy. I waved it off. On the way to the car, she walked slightly behind me. I noticed, but didn't slow down. In the past, I would have waited, put an arm around her. But now, I let the distance speak. It spoke louder than any accusation. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I told her I had heartburn, said I didn't want to keep her up with tossing and turning. She looked at me too long before saying, okay, in that quiet, clipped voice people use when they know they're not being told the truth but can't challenge it yet. She fell asleep fast, and I got to work. Not packing. Not exactly. I started pulling documents, the ones I'd need to make a clean exit. The mortgage, her car title, a copy of our prenup she forgot existed, bank statements she thought I never looked at. I wasn't preparing to run. I was preparing to leave correctly. There's a difference. Anyone can run. But to leave clean, leave calm, leave in a way that can't be rewritten into a tantrum or a breakdown, that takes patience. Planning. Cold hands. I printed screenshots, transferred files, took photos of things I hoped I'd never have to use in court. Every move precise, quiet, surgical. At 3:40 a.m., I stood in the middle of our kitchen and realized I didn't want anything. Not the blender we fought over last Black Friday. Not the antique mirror she said made the hallway feel taller. Not the set of copper pans she bought for both of us, but never let me touch. I didn't want the things. I wanted the truth. And now that I had it, the rest was just clutter. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only honest sound in the house. Then I went back to the couch. Not to sleep, to wait. In 12 hours, I had a meeting with a lawyer I hadn't told anyone about. Not even my mother. I wasn't going to burn the bridge with fire. I was going to cut it, clean, smooth, and quiet. The kind of silence you only hear after something ends completely. It was 11:16 a.m. when she came home from her quick run to the store, holding a paper bag with 1 baguette and 2 lemons. Not groceries, just props. She found me at the kitchen table, not slouched, not pacing, just sitting, straight-backed, a mug of tea cooling in front of me. Not coffee. She knew I only drank tea when I was sick or sad. She froze in the doorway like she'd stepped into the wrong house. I let the silence sit. Let it breathe. Let it crawl under her skin the way her lies had been crawling under mine for months. She set the bag down on the counter, smoothed her hair, tried to smile. Hey, you're home early. I nodded. No small talk. No performance. Just stillness. She took a cautious step forward. You okay? I had a meeting this morning, I said. Calm. Even. Dead quiet. Her face didn't change, but something behind her eyes pulled back like a tide before a wave. With who? A lawyer. There it was, the first flicker. Not shock. Not guilt. Fear. But not the kind that comes from being caught. The kind that comes from losing control. She laughed. Too quickly. Dorian, come on. Don't be dramatic. What are you even? I slid the folder across the table toward her. No label. Just a dull, blue file. The kind you'd forget in a drawer until it ruins your life. She didn't touch it. I don't need to read anything, she said. Then you already know what's in it. That stopped her cold. She looked down at the folder like it was something radioactive. And maybe it was. Inside were timelines, annotated screenshots, copies of altered invoices, and a summary of every lie I'd confirmed. Nothing illegal. Nothing scandalous. Just everything she thought she hid well enough. She sat down slowly, her hands folded tight in her lap. You've been tracking me? No, I said. I've been listening. You were just loud in the wrong places. A pause. Is this really how you want to do this? No, I said. This is how you made me do it. And then I did something I never thought I would. I told her I loved her. Not the woman standing in front of me now. This cold, distant version dressed in curated empathy. No, I told her I loved the idea of her. The memory. The version that danced with me barefoot in the hallway after your promotion. The version who cried when I bought her that stupid fox necklace at the street fair because it looked like it had secrets. I told her I didn't know when that woman disappeared. I told her I tried to pretend she was still in there. I told her that every time I looked at her and couldn't feel safe, I hated myself more than I could ever hate her. And then I said the one thing that made her flinch. You didn't break my heart, Leora. You just made me ashamed for protecting someone who wouldn't do the same for me. Her breath hitched. That small sound, just one syllable of pain slipping through clenched teeth, hit harder than any confession. Still, she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered, "So what now?" Now nothing. I told her I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to drag her through court. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my time back. I wanted my dignity returned in whatever pieces she hadn't already buried beneath polite betrayal. I told her I'd be moving out by the end of the week. I already had a temporary place. The paperwork was filed. The bank accounts would split. The rest, the couch, the pans, the hallway mirror, she could keep. I didn't want to win. I wanted to be done. She didn't say much after that. Just sat there, eyes flicking across the folder like she could see through it. Like she could edit reality with sheer willpower. But this wasn't a story she controlled anymore. I stood up, took my tea, and left the kitchen. Not in a storm. Not in tears. Just gone. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. I moved out on a Thursday. No drama. No boxes dragged down the stairs at midnight. Just one trip. 2 suitcases, 1 backpack, and a stack of folders I'd already gone over 100 times but brought anyway. Not because I needed the evidence anymore, but because it reminded me what I'd survived. The apartment I rented was small. Nothing fancy. The ceiling fan made a clicking sound when it turned, and the bathroom light took 3 seconds to warm up. But the silence there? It wasn't heavy. It was clean. Unoccupied. I slept on the floor the first night. No mattress yet. Just me, a blanket, and the kind of exhaustion that wraps around your bones and whispers, "You're safe now." And for the first time in a year, I believed it. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, made coffee in a thrift store mug, sat by the window, and didn't feel the need to check my phone. That was new. I didn't cry. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt unburied. Over the next few weeks, I started putting things together, both literally and otherwise. Built a desk, bought cheap curtains, started a new folder on my computer titled "Not for Her," wrote down ideas, lists, goals I'd forgotten I ever had. I started calling old friends again. People I'd distanced myself from out of embarrassment or exhaustion. People who'd once asked, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah," because it was easier than explaining why I didn't recognize my own life. One of them, Reed, invited me to a little weekend hike group he runs. I went. I hated the first 20 minutes. My legs hurt. I forgot to bring water. But at the top of the trail, looking out over a misty stretch of hills, I breathed in and didn't feel like an imposter anymore. I started therapy too. Not to talk about her, but to talk about me. Because somewhere between being her husband and being her mirror, I'd stopped existing as my own person. I was just a reflection of her needs, her moods, her versions of the truth. Now, I was learning how to exist alone, not lonely, but independent, solid. And one morning, maybe a month later, I found the gold earring. It was still in my coat pocket. I'd forgotten all about it. A small, circular lie tucked between lint and receipts. I held it for a minute. Then I walked outside, opened the dumpster lid, and dropped it in without ceremony. Because I didn't need proof anymore. I had the truth. The real kind. The kind you don't have to argue about. The kind that lets you let go. And if you're wondering what happened to her, I'll tell you what I know. She moved on quickly. Or maybe she never stopped moving. But I heard she changed jobs. Changed her hair. Started going by Leo instead of Leora. Reinventing herself again, as she always did. I don't hate her for it. Some people run from the truth because they don't know who they are without the lies. I just don't chase anymore. These days, my life is quiet. Not in the painful, repressed way it used to be, but in the way that says, "This is mine now." I go on hikes. I read paper books again. I've even started painting, badly, awkwardly, but for no one but me. My therapist says that's progress. And when people ask if I'm okay, I don't say yeah, just to end the conversation. Now I say, I'm getting better. And I mean it.